wrapped in melancholy, with the wood wands of holly, suggestions that obliterate to camouflage the folly. Attempted mental robbery, executed sloppily. The papacy, this mockery, and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet.
Sweet eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful, friends. Tonight I am lucky to have a guest who I met on one of the most synchronistic and random days of my life, where I was led to a spiritual event, the likes of which I had never been to before. One of the many nearly unbelievably synchronistic aspects of my experience there that day involved a class I sat in on with a man who radiated purity, calm, wellness, and wisdom. And this man turns out to be a lifelong spiritual traveler, a teacher, a guide to thousands, an expert in Vedic astrology and Enneagram readings, a publisher and an author, and a guiding light for so many. Indra Rinzler, thank you so much for coming to Rogueways tonight.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's excellent to have you here.
What a wonderful introduction.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. I like to just remind my listeners of a few things before we get started, and that is that I have this site, rogueways.org or corysharman.com. They both take you to the same place where you can get lots more free goodies. Here you can grab a tarot reading while you are at it. I offer a couple of those options. And now you have not only tickets to the event this summer, Logic 2020, that will be right outside of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania on the summer solstice. And there's also a really cool eclipse that weekend, and we're going to have a really good time. You can also grab some classes that I offer and some guidance if you're looking for those things. And also some gear, Rogueways gear if you want any of the cups or shirts or things like that. So those are all the things you can do. Oh, one more thing. My favorite are my subscribers on my Subscribestar page. This is the best way to support me and keep the show going and get access to even more stuff that you love. My writing, my audiobooks, and some videos I do with people that aren't found on YouTube or elsewhere. They're all here at the Subscribestar. And if you sign up, you also get a free copy of Sine Curve of Aeons. For now, we're offering a free copy of this for anyone subscribing at above the $1 level. You do have to check your messages after you subscribe, because that's how I contact you to see where you want me to send this. So make sure you do that once you subscribe. Check back in every once in a while. Make sure you're responding to any messages that I send you. So those are all the ways that you can support me and the things that I have going on. And I'm so grateful for all of those of you who are doing that. Thank you so much for your support. And so, Indra, back to you. I like to start the show with a pointless question of the episode, and I'm wondering in this season where we're having some fears about viruses running around the world, how you like to keep yourself safe and well and healthy and free of infection.
Oh, actually, I spent the weekend not feeling so well, but I feel better today. I'm in Chiang Mai, Thailand right now, and I leave for the U.S. On Sunday the 15th.
Soon.
And I've been here since the middle of October. Yeah. So this date of the 15th was planned quite a while ago. So I've only had 2 panic attacks of moving my flight up. And the panic attack was not so much getting the disease, but just getting stuck.
Yeah.
And I was talked down off the ceiling a couple of times by friends. And what I've come to, why I'm still here, is that there was more to learn and more growth in staying.
Wow.
Than there was in leaving. And that I also used Heart's Truth. And Heart's Truth told me that I should stay, even though it may not have been logical.
Is Heart's Truth a way of sort of asking, like, the universe or God or however you want to think of that for an answer and then feeling it in your body?
It's not so much asking; it's more just feeling it in your body. It's the intuition. It's a truth behind the story.
That's awesome.
People write me, clients, they say, my heart says. Well, that heart is usually the mind. The heart can be the gut, and the heart can be the mind. But usually when the heart says, it's the mind. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You agree?
Yes.
Yeah. So I have so somebody will say, well, spirits. I feel spirit telling me. So that's also probably the mind,
Yeah.
because spirit, with spirit will tell spirit. I don't think spirit has an opinion.
Yeah.
No spirit I've been involved in has an opinion. The mind has an opinion, and the
Yeah.
mind is darn sneaky.
True.
So so I guess my intuition was you were going to ask me about this. And as far as the illnesses, I'm not so up on that. I did go out and get some vitamin C and some vitamin D, and I've been loading with those. And so what happens is that the universe gives you what you need. And so I don't seek out the articles, but if I talked to a friend yesterday, and she gave me the whole lowdown.
Yeah.
And the universe is always doing this. And if the universe isn't, it's because we're not hearing it.
Yes.
It's not because it's not happening.
I absolutely agree with that. And I think,
So
like,
shut up.
right, the more you stop and listen, the better things are going to go for you, I think. But it is hard. Like you're saying, a lot of times we think, like, oh, my heart says or spirit says, and it's actually just our mind sort of tricking us into something, that isn't necessarily the best path, but we can convince ourselves it is for the moment. And so, do you have any suggestions on how people can get more clear than that and get past that sort of trick of the mind?
Well, I don't. Well, you say it's not the best path, so it's not the best doesn't really come into this. There's no best path. So there's free will. I heard you talk about something some clip, and I'm not sure that you're into free will or what you were saying, but the teachings I've been following, they say we can choose.
Yeah,
So that doesn't mean that we choose our highest good, but we can choose the experience that we want.
true.
And we need some of the crappy experiences in order to grow. I mean, those are good choices, even if they're the choice you make at 20 may not be the choice you make at 30, 40, or 50. But that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that it's a bad or wrong choice.
That's an absolutely
So
great point.
so yeah, just go with the flow. So I forget the question you just asked me. Maybe I answered it, or maybe I didn't. But
I think you did. I mean, you have a couple answers that I think that I could pull out of there, and one is the practical, where you're like, well, I'm taking vitamin C and D3 or vitamin D or whatever you're taking. So there's some aspect of health that you're aware that you need to be healthy in order to avoid disease and illness. But another aspect of it was that you just sort of are trusting that and that the universe is going to provide what you need when you need it. And but it sounds like you also had to talk yourself down from sort of fleeing where you're at, and giving into that sort of
yeah,
fear path. So, but like you say, like if you would have given in to that fear and run away, that would have held its own lessons and experiences that wouldn't have been necessarily bad. And then you chose to stay, and that has other lessons and experiences that
yeah,
are also going to help you in some different way.
yeah. You translated very well. So I
Yeah.
think that the experience of following our own truth is really important to um, to trust. I've been working with uh, going to do a Facebook post here about safe and safety, and realized as I was exploring it yesterday that it comes down to trust. Trust is the most important thing that we can. Is one of the most important things that we can gain. The ability to be able to trust. The to We have no control, but we think we have control. And so when we trust, it's giving away our control to something that's beyond us, that
Yeah.
has an intelligence, that the heart beats, we don't do anything, that the food digests, that the bowels work. I mean, what do we do to do that? Get over a toilet. It's that's just sanitation. But the fact is that there is a power, and in that power, the ability to be able to live by the wisdom of that power gives us the ability to surrender and trust and to take yourself deep into the spiritual path, not to have groovy experiences and not to be vibey and not to have good friends and a good life, quote unquote, good life, but to actually find the joy within, not as a out of body experience, but as a true moment to moment feeling that has that you feel the joy of life, even whether it's the sadness or in the exaltation. This is, this is a long journey. This is a very long journey, and it requires a meticulous adherence to noticing when the ego is involved, and when you are holding a position and you are have wanting an outcome, desiring an outcome, and we have to develop meticulous. We have to be discerning, and there is no other. Well, I don't want to say there is no other way. There may be another way, but this is the way that most of us have to go about it.
I love that. I love this idea of trusting too, because to me, it's almost like an equivalent to faith. You know, like what some people might call faith, I feel like is this sort of trust that you can have, which I don't often have, which I have to like try to remind myself to have and to find that. Because the times in my life when I have experienced it, it's been profound, and it's been like, well, that's real, and this is actually the way, as you're saying, and this is it. But you get caught up in like you're saying, like desires and being attached to outcomes and ego and these sort of patterns that you have, and it can be hard to like go back to that just trust and faith that almost like this detachment from judging yourself or the experience you're having or something like that.
Yeah, you got to stop judging too. Stop comparing and having judgments.
And none of that is easy for me. But I like to try.
Well, now you know you're the work of your life. Isn't that wonderful?
Yes, it's actually the best. And I like to think that you working on yourself in this life is actually the best gift you can give to anyone else as well. You're actually doing it for yourself, but you're doing it for yourself in this almost like selfless way, because you're doing it for yourself so that you can be a better part of the universe or something, or be a more functional part of the universe, or, be able to help other people be that or something.
I would drop a better part of the universe, but the
There's
fact
my
is,
judgment.
if you want to help the world, help yourself.
Period.
Want to heal the world, heal yourself.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I want to jump straight into something that I found in your in your sort of media packet thing, and it said that you're sure. saying that we're in the Bronze Age, or is it Dwapara Yuga?
Yeah.
And that struck me because I feel like we're in the Kali Yuga, and so clearly you do not agree. And so what are your reasons for saying that we're in the Dwapara Yuga? And then are you saying that we're going into the Kali Yuga, or we're coming out of it now?
Out of it.
Out of it. We're past the worst of it.
Yes.
So what is the basis for that? Because it feels to me like we're in the Kali Yuga.
In 1894, at the Kumbh Mela, which is the great gathering in India that's been going on for millenniums.
Wow.
A young man was walking along. A saintly man was walking along, and a fellow stopped him and said, "There is a man by the tree that would like to talk to you." So the saintly man sat down in front of this young man, and the young man said to him, "Welcome, Swamiji." And the man said, "I'm not a Swami." And the young man said, "Those who I say are a Swami are a Swami." And the man was, thank you for this wonderful setup, by the way. And the man, the young man was the deathless avatar Babaji. And the saintly man became known to the world as Sri Yukteswar, guru to Paramahansa Yogananda, author of Autobiography of a Yogi. And in this conversation, Babaji asked Yukteswar to write a book. That book became known as uh, the Holy Science. And he published it that year, which he was asked to compare in it he compared sayings sentences from the Bhagavad Gita and the Bible to show the universality of all religions.
Whoop, whoop.
Now, I believe, maybe wrongly, that while that might have been an important issue now, I think now, 125 years later, it's not such a. I mean, that's pretty a universal idea. But in this book, Yukteswar was a college graduate. And he was, by the way, are you familiar with him?
No.
Okay, so Paramahansa Yogananda, Autobiography of a Yogi, are you familiar with that?
No.
Okay, so Autobiography of a Yogi was possibly the best known spiritual classic book ever, that is possibly ever written. Millions and millions sold. He was the first Indian guru to live in America. And came in 1920. The first one to visit was Vivekananda, but he came for Chicago World's Fair in the 1890s. And Yogananda came in 1920 and left the country for a year and a half to go back to his beloved India, but he passed on here in the early 50s. So the lineage was Babaji, who was the deathless saint, and Lahiri Mahashaya was his disciple, and Yukteswar was his disciple, and Yogananda was his disciple. On this day in 1894, Babaji told him that I'm going to send you a disciple who will go to the West. That turned out to be Yogananda, and all of these stories are told in the Autobiography of a Yogi, which is not only wonderful to read of his life, but people read about it. Many people read it, and then go on to a different path. But for many people, some people it becomes their path. But for many people, it brings them to the spiritual path. And there's so many stories of the miraculous in India. He was a deep seeker. He was probably realized at birth, and a very special at birth. And the synchronicities in the stories, and in the book, and in the stories in the book, and it's fascinating reading. So, Yukteswar was a college graduate. He was also an astronomer and an astrologer. And in the introduction to this book, and he says, "Oh, and by the way, we're about to enter Dwapara Yuga." He is the only one in India that talks about that we are in Dwapara Yuga. He actually gives dates, and he explains how it works, that there's a descending and an ascending cycle. Mm-hmm. That they're each 12,000 years long. And this Yuga cycle is comparable to the progression of the equinox.
Right.
He said, and you don't have to believe this in order to believe what he says, but he says that the sun has a dual. It turns out that most of the suns, that it's more normal for a sun to have a dual than for there to be a single sun. So the dual sun means that they're in partnership. And so when they pull together, it's said to be the Sirius, one of the Sirius suns. Huh. So when they pull themselves together, so they're going in space, and when they pull themselves together, the sun moves faster. So when they pull themselves closer, that's a higher age, and when they're further apart, then that's the lower age. The lowest age was 500 AD, and we are now 24 degrees closer, 72 degrees, 1 degree is 72 years. Yeah. We are 24 degrees moved, and so we're now into the second age, the age of Dwapara Yuga. The top age is Sat Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. And he's the only one in India that says we're in Dwapara Yuga. If you match up the history, it makes a lot of sense. There's a wonderful book written by some friends of mine called The Yugas. And it easily explains. Yuteshwar's book isn't so easy to read, and the introduction is, but it's rather short. And my friends have taken it into a lot of detail. It's really fascinating. And I believe this is the death throes. This chaos is the death throes of the Kali Yuga. This is, I call it the dinosaur dance, the dinosaur death dance. That if you maybe I'm seeing too many movies, but if a dinosaur was going to do a death
Yeah.
dance, it would be it would be like this chaos. And the old forms are dying. The clues the clues of the higher age is how quickly. Well, I first heard natural when I moved to California in 1970, and we started having natural food stores, which isn't really a term so much used anymore.
Yeah.
But we see natural has come into products. It's become meaningless because everybody uses it,
Yeah.
and the way yoga has exploded. When I'm in India, there's people from every country in the world. When I first started going, you know, people didn't come out of, China, Japan, South America, South Africa, not just Europe and America. It's all over the world. People are coming to India, and I say to them, "Have you got a yoga studio near you?" Yup.
Yeah.
Well, that wasn't like that 30 years ago.
Wow.
In fact, when I first went to Rishikesh 20 years ago, there was the only in a couple of ashrams was there yoga there.
Wow.
Now there are, I don't know how many schools, maybe 50 schools, 30 schools. It's endless. So uh, this is the nature of it. The nature of Dwapara Yuga is the energy age, the mind body connection, feng shui, and I can't think of the name. There's an Indian feng shui. I can't think of the name right now, but
I didn't know that.
yeah, there's an Indian feng shui too. But
It's like a growing awareness of the relationship of energy and consciousness and whatnot. And it's almost like, we talk about, or we hear a lot about the great awakening that is happening right now, or that has been happening. And I wonder if that would be part of it then too, that people are literally waking up more and more
absolutely,
from this sort of long slumber we've had.
absolutely. So he says that it's a 2,000 year period. It has a transition of 200 years. That was from 1700 to 1900, and then the 2,000 years, which goes to 3,900. And then we'll have 200 years, and then we'll have 300 years introduction to Treta Yuga, Treta Yuga, and then 3,000 years, 300 years, 400 years introduction, 4,000 years, 4,000 years, and then we head down. So the interesting thing is on the way down is that we didn't have language, and we could, because we spoke uh, with telepathy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we didn't need language. And then as we got dumber, as we got lower, then we started developing languages. And the highest language of Sanskrit was developed perhaps in Sat Yuga, perhaps in Treta Yuga, but it has special sounds associated with it. And then as we went further and further in, then the ceremony, then the spirituality had to be ceremonial, because the people didn't have it in them to um, to get it mentally anymore. And there were significance symbols that were deep and powerful. But as we got lower and lower in as we descended, then there became the priest class, and the priest class became uh, uh, father to son, and it was only for priests. And then it became that they would tell you, because we had lost, and the ceremonies became meaningless. I'm sort of jumping ahead, but they
Yeah.
ended up becoming meaningless and symbolic. And a lot of the teachings that are in India right now are from Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga started in 600 BC. There was a time in 600 BC when we had Buddha and we had Lao Tzu and we had so many other teachers. It was an incredible period, and what happened is that feng shui coming back and yoga coming back, we kind of jumped 2,000 and 3,000 years back to the ending of the descending part of Dwapara Yuga,
Hmm.
and they sort of all skipped Kali Yuga and came over to the ascending Dwapara Yuga again. Suddenly they were found again.
Wow. Yeah, that's the cycle really fascinates me, and I like a lot that the golden age is a lot longer than the dark age because and I like the
So there,
concept that there's sort of an opposite path therefore. So like if you're in a Kali Yuga, like one tiny spark of light sort of can just like illuminate everything really quickly, whereas if that happened in the golden age, it'd be like hardly noticed. The growth would be less significant. So even though you're in this like dark, slow age of doesn't seem very good. There's some actually really good aspects of it, maybe for a soul during that
so
time.
there are. So the value of the dense age is well, we as humans, we can see the value of the dense age because we're in physical bodies. We're in
Huh.
the densest form that there is. And so it's a little bit of the if the when you're down and out, then you can appreciate what you have, you know. It's like the dense age is a
True.
teacher.
Yeah. We've literally physically experienced the like etheric equivalent of that. So,
Yes, and yeah, go ahead.
no, you go ahead. I was going to jump to a totally different subject.
So Oh, okay. Well, no, I'm glad you brought this up because this is really, people are really interested in this. And for me, while I read the book in 1971, the significance of it, well, I should say a deeper significance of it came to me, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago, maybe not quite that long when for in my own work with Enneagram and astrology, it gave me an understanding of well, first of all, the history is not straight line. How did we get so dumb? This explains that.
Yes.
And and um, to understand that we are in a higher age gives an understanding to the teachings because a lot of astrology, I don't know what you're going to go into next, but a lot of astrology. I mean, the Enneagram work that I do and the astrology work I do is kind of different from most people. A lot of the astrology work, I believe, is based on Kali Yuga, and this whole idea that you're stuck and that your planet is square this and you're kind of stuck is a Kali Yuga way of looking at things, and it is not the approach that I have
Oh, that's interesting.
um,
Yeah, because
been
my
given.
my experience with astrology is exactly like what you just said. It's like here you are, you're stuck there. You have these like oppositions and things that are sort of like forces that you have some free will always, but like there's these things you can't sort of change or deal with. So that would be interesting to hear how that's different. And then I also noticed that you say that you're a Vedic astrologer, and I don't even know what that is. So that would be cool to hear
So
about
Vedic,
Vedic astrologer. Yeah.
okay, so Vedic astrology is the astrology of India.
Hmm.
So I like to say that the astrology is kind of the same, while the Indian astrologers have added a lot of bells and whistles. The
Okay.
basic astrology is the same. You've got 12 houses. You've got this to say we don't in Vedic we don't use the outer planets
Okay.
because they were not. They say because they were not invented, were not discovered when Vedic astrology was started.
Fascinating.
Um, I don't use them because I'm not interested in predictive astrology. I'm interested in using astrology to give you the strengths and weaknesses of your chart, of your personality. It doesn't evolve to me, it doesn't really involve the soul, it involves the personality.
Hmm.
And so the strengths and weaknesses, the outer planets move slowly and they're more generational. The fact that your mother say was born in the hippie generation, but she wasn't a hippie, which she probably was or is. But the fact that it was her generation, Trump's my generation, all these Sanders, all these 70s, they're kind of my generation, and maybe, Sanders might have been a hippie. Warren doesn't seem to be a hippie, and Trump definitely wasn't.
Yeah.
But so we have I mean, I don't want to get the political. I'm just using that as an example. But the idea is that those are generational influences, and they're not really so important to me in terms of my waking up, going back to trust and surrender. They don't really come into account. So I don't use the outer planets. I find that that the system of the inner planets, that in order to use the outer planets, they compromise the system a little bit in order to fit them into a positive and a negative.
Yeah.
But the inner planets work perfectly, and those are enough for me. I like to say to people that that's enough. So the main difference in Vedic astrology is that the chart is cast with sidereal time.
And so
start time.
And that's the one where it's more what we are actually seeing and not kind of cast back to some long ago time where the stars were or something. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So the Western astrology uses tropical time, and there's the relationship between the sun and the earth, and that's fixed. So that's the seasons. And so March 21st is Aries 1 every year. Aries 0 every year. But if you take into account the earth looking at the sun, and then the stars behind the sun, the sky behind the sun, that changes because the progression of the equinox, the sun is moving.
Yeah.
And so we are now 72 years, 1 degree. We're now 24 degrees different from what we were in 500 AD when this was started. It's called sidereal time or start time.
Okay.
And so the chart is cast 24 degrees backwards. And so if you think that you're a Capricorn, most likely you're a Sagittarius.
Huh.
And quite often in my readings, people will say, "Oh, I never considered myself a Capricorn. I never understood that makes so much sense." Then there's the people who fight getting rid of that idea. But what happens quite often is that it isn't that their sun is in Capricorn, but it may be that their Saturn or the Venus moves into Capricorn. And so there's a Capricorn energy. I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah.
That there's a Capricorn energy in them, but it's not actually their sun. And so it's actually, rather than it being their self-image, it's actually more their ability to communicate, or their ability to have integrity with Venus, or their ability to expand, which is Jupiter. And that they identify with it. They have identified it with it as their sun because they're given as their sun energy.
Yeah.
Sun sign. And when I explain it that it's actually your ability to expand, then much of the time people can understand that it's actually more pinpointed.
That's fascinating.
But this idea that you're stuck. This is Kali Yuga. This is the Kali Yuga age of materialism, is that you're stuck. So I like to say that Henry VIII didn't say to one of the wives, "So let's go down to the village and we'll have an open clinic on Tuesdays and Thursdays." The universal healthcare is not a Kali Yuga idea. This is a Dwapara Yuga idea.
Interesting.
And the internet and the atomic energy. Yudhishthira said in 1894 we're going to enter Dwapara Yuga. And in the decade of the 1900s to 1910, we had quantum physics discovered. We had the first airplane flight. We had Pavlov and the dog and conditioning invented or discovered, and relativity.
Wow. Just
in 10 years.
All of a sudden, yeah.
Talk about coming in with a bang.
That's pretty interesting. And then you look at the, the time since then, and it's like gone from unrecognizable to what it is now, where I'm staring at two screens and I also have a phone right in front of me, and like,
Yeah,
and I can,
absolutely. And something that I like to refer to is that the population, a lot of what we're seeing, the result of what we're feeling now in our cultures is the population is about 6 times grown in 100 years. People talk about people I met who went to India in the early 70s say there was 700,000 people there. It's nearly doubled in 50 years in
wow.
India.
Wow. Yeah.
And think
I feel
about the
crowded.
problem. Think about if you had if you had two kids and you went to 12 kids in 3 years, what would your life be like,
Yeah. Utter chaos. Yeah.
Yeah. So so studying astrology from the early 70s and the Enneagram for 20 years, and then taking the idea of Dwapara Yuga and that there is an energetic change, it gave me an ability to see a new way of looking at these modalities. And the way was that we are not static, and that there was a holding back in the astrology, like you say, that we are fixed by our circumstance. There are reasons to make this a teaching. The reason is, I like to say, billable hours, because then you give your power away.
Hmm.
You give your power away. And going back to what you said about faith, and I don't know exactly what you mean by that, but to me, if faith means that you put your trust in something else, that's not good, because you need to have the trust in yourself. And so this in astrology, then you give your power away to the gemstone for the people that do that, or you give your power away to the astrologer. And then when you have a problem, the old you give a somebody a fish, then they eat for a day, but you teach them to fish, then they can live for a lifetime. So the idea is to empower people to understand that they can overcome the planets, they can overcome the energy of the planets. There's nothing wrong with the planet. It's only the angle of the planet creates a mental a mental inclination, and we can see through that mental inclination, just like we can be shy in our teens and not shy in our 30s and 40s, and we can be withdrawn and more extrovert, and then go back to inward.
Hmm.
It used to be withdrawn, and now it's inward. It's the same being by yourself, but it's got a completely different energy. So
Hmm.
yeah, so the idea is to teach people to be able to. Are there challenging planets or charts? Absolutely. Everybody has challenges in it. Some charts are very challenging, but they're neither good nor bad, and they're not better or not worse. It's just a circumstance.
Yes.
You can be taller and shorter. You can be male and female. You can be you can live in city and you can live in country. You can have really good parents and parents that are not very present, and so it's just a circumstance. It's neither good nor bad,
I
even though
definitely,
we may put judgments on that.
yes. I definitely emphasize the same thing when I'm doing my tarot readings for people, that, these things may come up in the reading and they may seem really bad. They may seem really, dark or whatever. But when it comes down to it, it's just the circumstance, exactly like you're saying. And the power you have is to then look at that and know that this is the way it is, and then decide, what am I going to do now? And in fact, by looking at it alone, you're already changing the circumstance just by being aware of it, right? But that's like the first powerful tool you have. And then you get to choose, and that's the next powerful tool you have. What will you do with it, and where will you go from here, knowing that that's what's happening? Because you can't change the external world, but you can change yourself. You can't control what you're doing. And so I like to highlight that empowerment, like you're saying. And make sure people understand that they have this tool. Because I think a lot of time with things like astrology or tarot or these things, people kind of can look at it and say like, well, that's just the way it is then, the end. And it's like, that's not the end. You get to write the end. You get to decide what happens next.
So you make me think that. So you told me that you came to a class that I gave in Portland,
Yes.
and we talked, a few weeks ago to do this, but we didn't really talk philosophy.
Yeah.
And yet here you're saying and telling your clients exactly what I'm telling my clients,
Yes.
even though we have never discussed that.
Yes.
So I don't think we're in Kali Yuga.
That's a good point. I like it. I like it. It
The
was
fact
interesting.
that we can universally come to the same truth says that there's something going on here.
It's really, really fascinating. That day I had looked for the first time ever. This is so silly, but I looked at Facebook events. Facebook has like an events thing, and you can find out like what's near you. And I needed to fill like 3 or 4 hours. And I mean, I didn't need to fill it, but I was like, I have this time. What could I do that would be fun and fulfilling? And I saw this like, oh, it's a spiritual expo. And oh, it's a mile away from where I'm standing right now. I could literally walk down the road and be there in 10 minutes. And so I went and went in, and a lot of very synchronistic things happened that day. But one of them was really interesting because I was late to your class, actually. I really wanted to go, but I had been waylaid by some other synchronistic experience. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to be late. And I was like, well, I shouldn't go. It's rude to go into a class partway through. And I was like battling with myself. I was like, but I really want to just see, I want to meet this person and see what they're doing. And I was like, oh, I'll just sneak in. I'll just apologize profusely if it's a problem. And I'll leave if it feels like I shouldn't be there or whatever. And I walked in, and when I walked in, you said, oh, you're perfectly on time. I said, oh, well, then I guess here I am. It was just funny because it was exactly the thing I was worried about. And you were instantly like, nope, this is perfect.
Yeah, well, what I would say now is you've got a good idea of your own story, all that mental chatter that you went through.
Yeah, trying to stop myself from doing what I was supposed to do. And then you did a really cool. You did a really cool meditation that had something to do with a train, and I can't remember it very well, but it was like also exactly what I needed at that time.
So the train is to stop at different stations and get rid of our mental noise.
Yeah, that's what it was. It was really helpful too, because
Yeah.
that day before I got there, I was actually having a pretty bad day.
Well,
As far as
wonderful.
things go.
Yes. Wonderful that you came, and that I do appreciate your reminding me that we think that we're isolated and people won't care. I had a client telling me recently, if I do something that no one will. She said, if I write, I said, you should write. She says, well, I don't know what to write about. I said, well, okay. What she's going to write about is her experiences of her own awakening as she goes further into it.
Oh, cool.
She said, well, no one will know. What will people care? I said, that's not your concern. People will care. It's not your story. You don't have to send them. I like to say my job is to put up the flyer. I don't have to bring the people. I have to put the flyer up. And I met a friend of mine one time, and he said, he didn't feel he needed to put up the flyer. So, and for him, it didn't seem to be a need. I feel like I'm supposed to put up the flyer.
Yeah, at least have the invitation.
But I don't have
somewhere.
I don't have to be responsible for whether they come or not, which is very freeing.
I love that. The way I have a similar sort of outlook towards it, and the way I look at it is like, I'm writing for myself, or I'm creating the show for myself. Like, I just enjoy talking with people like you, and this is fun for me. And it's really, really cool that it also tends to be fun for other people who can find some value in it. And that's just a bonus. That's a benefit. And I really enjoy that too. But that's not the real reason why I'm doing it. The real reason is kind of selfish, but it kind of goes back to that thing we're talking about where it's not like a bad kind of selfish. In fact, this kind of selfish is then the best thing you can do for the whole world, actually. So that's how I look at it. It's like, I'm doing this for myself, and if other people find it interesting or exciting or helpful in some way, that's an awesome bonus.
So I'll take you a step further. Is that what I've come to realize, which has been really difficult, is that the things that I'm teaching are the things that I need to hear.
It's a good point.
So that I actually am telling other people, because I actually need to follow the advice surprised myself.
That's almost like the fake it till you make it. You like keep like practicing this until you actually get it. I love that. Well, what do you
It's a little
think?
bit like that, yeah.
What do you think
Absolutely.
about synchronicity? And, like that day, I could tell like a whole entire story that would take a whole episode just to go through all the synchronicities that happened to me that day and the cool experiences. But when you're having things like that, that happen, what do you think that really is? What do you think's going on, and what do you think we should do with it?
Well, I think synchronicity is always happening. I just think that it's just only sometimes when we can see it. I don't think there's anything that we need to do with it. We just need to follow our intuition. We need to, we need to let go of the mental ideas when we can, and we don't have to berate ourselves because we haven't. And we need to follow heart's truth. Heart's truth is the intuition to do something, even though it may make no mental sense. So they teach us to go inward in order to figure out where to eat and what to order. And while it can take a lot of time, it can take time to figure that out. It's a practice. The practice is this life is a practice. The practice doesn't end. On the mat and off the mat are the same. There is no time out. Even sleep is pretty involving.
That's true. That's absolutely true. I like that because it's interesting. You can get sort of caught up in these synchronicities, and sometimes, like when they happen really, really quickly, one after the other, and you can get really like, what does it mean? What am I supposed to do with this? And like now you're like putting all of this almost like negative expectation. Like if you don't do the right thing with it, then that's going to be the wrong thing. And then what have you done with this like beautiful gift? And in reality, like maybe the best aspect of it is to just sit back and feel that, because it's like a joyous feeling to notice this, like, oh, this is, what I arranged for myself, or, this is what the universe actually is, or this is the sort of playful part of being. But if you project too much of that expectation onto it or something, it's almost like you're not really feeling it as fully as you could, or experiencing it as truly as you could.
Absolutely. When we start projecting out a relationship, it can go south. You can have expectations. Expectations can poison anything. It can poison the best chocolate cake can be poisoned by expectations.
Yes. Or the simplest, like saying hello sometimes. It's like if the thing that happens next isn't what you expected, like that will poison the whole encounter.
Yeah, absolutely it can. But that's also a teacher.
It's true.
So what happens when we fall down? We pick ourselves up.
Hopefully.
And when we fall down again, what happens? We pick ourselves up. This is just life, and we don't have to. Yes, we give it a lot of meaning. A lot of that meaning is ego. Comes from ego. Is that wrong? No. Is it truth? No. But it's our path until it isn't.
Yes.
And it isn't until we let go of all of those stories and just let come what comes. Let live in what is rather than what could be or should be. That there's a peace that comes within that we don't lose.
Yes.
An
abiding peace.
An abiding. Absolutely. I love that word. I have a teacher that uses that.
It's a great word.
Abiding. I love that word.
It's like, where I was however many years ago, if I saw myself right now, I would be just perplexed. Like, how did I get there? How did you do that? How do you do this? And so I can't, there's parts of it where it's like, well, I could share this story with someone, or I can like sort of think back and reflect and see some part of it. But Like, how do you ever explain to somebody like how you would even start or go? And so that's what I like about this sort of teaching that you have, or that you embody or you share. Is just more like, no matter where you're at, that is exactly where you are starting, and being there and doing that is exactly what you do to get to that thing eventually. There's no sort of like set prescription really about it.
So I don't actually remember your coming in the room and my saying
No.
that. But what comes to me in the moment is that I could have felt your energy, and I could have unconsciously, not consciously, but unconsciously, has said it's a perfect time in order to overcome the your concern,
Yeah.
which could have also been my concern.
Yeah.
That you came in late. I don't know how late you were, but you came in late, and it was disruptive to me. So I could have been actually saying that for my own purpose,
Reminding
and had nothing to
yourself.
do with you.
That's
Yeah,
interesting.
reminding myself, or making it um, yeah, relaxing my own self. Who knows what's going on,
That's a really good
where these
point.
things come from.
Well, that's why I love that point too, that like all these things and all these people, they're all teachers. Because I think sometimes we can get caught up too on like, well, I'm a teacher, or like, oh, that's my teacher, or, like there's this label. And in reality, it's like really literally every single person, every single moment, every single experience is a teacher. If you are, receiving it with that mind, I guess, or looking at it in that way. And if you're not, then it's still going to be someday, if not right then, right? And so I like that idea. It's all a
Absolutely.
teaching moment. It's all practice.
Absolutely. There's a lady I go eat across the alley here in Thailand, the same lunch every day. This lady makes, this lady's about, I don't know, 4 feet tall, 4 feet 3 inches tall. And she's got big energy, and she's an artist. I get mixed veggies with tofu and rice every day. That's really inexpensive. And she's an artist. She puts in sprouts, and she puts in greens, and I don't think the vegetables are the same every day. I can't tell, but it doesn't really matter. But it's not the same as when you get the other places for a little bit more money. Usually they'll give 3 or 4 vegetables, and it doesn't have oomph to it anyways.
It has no like
So
love
she's
in
got a
it.
sign. So she's got a sign in her place that she's had for many years. She says she basically doesn't have Wi-Fi there. So she's basically telling people to get over it. So she says, talk to yourself, pretend it's 1996. Talk to each other, she says.
Yes. That's awesome.
So she speaks English, God only knows. She goes to her village every week to see her family. She lives upstairs from her store,
Wow.
from her restaurant. It's a very small place, and you kind of have to, she has a awning that comes out to block the sun. So you kind of have to, to get in there. It looks like nothing from the outside, but it's a gold mine, because
Wow.
there's such wisdom in the food that she makes. It's all made to order, and there's such love in there, even though she doesn't, you know, she can be stern, people, she doesn't take anything from anybody. So she can seem stern, but there's such love in that food. And so everybody is a teacher. I've learned traveling Asia and traveling the world that there's, when I went to Ethiopia, and I thought, it's not here yet. I got there, and I said, this would look terrible from the airport. It's terrible. Though when you go in from the airport, it's always scary. Some of these places, the ego is frightened. So I went, and I thought, oh my God, I'm back in Haiti. And so I spent a week there, and I come to find out that it hasn't come. It's already been there for a long, long time. It was one of the first societies, and that the Ethiopians at the highland of Ethiopia, which I haven't been to, but want to, but I probably won't, and that's okay. But anyway, they contain the headwaters of the Nile. So how did the Ark of the Covenant get to the headwaters, get to the Ethiopia? It's the headwaters of the Nile. You're standing in Cairo and you want to hide the Ark of Covenant. Where are you going to put it? You're going to go to the headwaters of the Nile.
Wow. Interesting.
And that's Ethiopia.
I just read
And
today that Ethiopia actually, as a ancient kingdom or whatever you want to call it, actually moved from closer to Northwest Africa, or even further out, maybe Atlantis if it was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, down to where it is now, over like a really, really long period of time. And so it's even more ancient than that locality, perhaps.
They had a museum that the remains of Lucy. Lucy is the first human, 4 million years old.
Oh yeah.
And the Ethiopian meal is they bring out a 3-foot bread.
Yeah.
And they dump the meat and vegetables or whatever you order in the middle of it, and everybody sits on stools around the bread and eats the same meal.
You like rip off the bread and grab some of the food and eat it.
Yeah.
I love that. That's so fun.
Everybody with the same thing. So I mean, they were and the people were beautiful. The women dressed a little bit dressed up a little bit, were very beautiful women, and they're had an elegance to them. And while it was impoverished in a way, and socioeconomically impoverished, there was a depth there that was breathtaking.
Wow.
I kind of got the idea to go there, and I mentioned this because when I mentioned this the last time I mentioned this, nobody knew anything about it. But because when I was in Jamaica, the Rastafarians, that they relate back to Ethiopia, that Rita Marley
Oh yeah.
had decided that Haile Selassie had the stigmata.
Yeah.
Haile Selassie was the Ethiopian dictator. And so there is a Rasta community that the government has given the Rastas some land, which I never went to, in Ethiopia. And the Rasta colors are the colors of the Ethiopian flag.
Yeah.
So I was at a period in my life when I was able to travel. I was traveling and visiting neat places, and I thought Ethiopia, so I went to check it out a little bit. And just to see, that was enough for my personality at the time. That was enough to see what was there, and it was oh my God, the stories of the quote unquote simple people you meet in Asia and all around the world. It's incredible. The Americans generally are so dense.
Yeah.
The civilized people are so dense.
It's really, really, it's like I think that density comes from all of this distraction and all of this attention to like details that don't matter or something, and all of this rush. So that's like what maybe creates that density or whatever it is. Because I think when you get back to these like places where people are living a little bit more simply and a little bit more in touch, it's like opens up that space for that depth, I guess.
That's definitely part of it. There's probably more parts to it. It's cultural. It's been built up for hundreds of years. The greed, the keeping up with the Joneses, the what you're talking about is more a manifestation to me of some other things, that root illnesses,
Psychoses.
That the third world wants. The Indians want to be westernized, and what you find is that these diseases, and I don't mean the white man. I don't mean the diseases that the Indians, the American Indians got, but the greed and all of these things they come in with as they seek to take on the lifestyle. These other ways of thinking come in. also.
Yeah, I do. I see that. And maybe there's a part of it too that has to do with a newness and a disconnection from sort of earth and tradition that feeds into it too. But I want to also go back to the Enneagram thing because we just kind of like mentioned it and glanced over it, but I'm not even that familiar with what Enneagram is. And I know that I took an Enneagram test and I vaguely remember the results, but I don't really understand the what it is or the aspects of it or what.
What number did you come up with? Do you remember the number?
It was literally every single number except one of them. It was like all of them, and they all had the exact same likelihood or something, or percentage, or whatever it was,
Okay.
rating, and they were all
So the
strong.
Okay, so the Enneagram of personality is about 50, is a teaching about 50 years old.
Oh,
And the
it's
Enneagram
very new.
itself was brought to us by Gurdjieff. If you're
Oh
familiar
yeah,
with Gurdjieff,
yes.
he was a one of the first New Age teachers 100 years ago, and
Wow,
a very mysterious man.
he keeps coming up in my
And
life
he get
lately.
yeah, he's a big one. Have you read Ouspensky's In Search of the Miraculous?
No.
Take that one on if you feel to.
Okay.
So it was his student. So so the Enneagram figure has three. He gave us the figure, but he didn't tell us where he got it from or if he made it up. The figure contains three geometric shapes: the circle, which represents unity; a triangle, which represents the law of three, which is the triads, which
Everywhere.
is active, passive, and neutral.
Hmm.
And the law of seven is there's a hexag, a thing called a hexag, which I like to say looks like one of those fancy Staples paper clips. And it covers 6 points, but it's the law of seven. And the law of seven is that everything changes.
Hmm.
The one law is that everything changes. And so the Enneagram is it has 9 points. The 9 points are the 6 points of the hexag and the 3 points of the triangle.
Hmm.
And so they put things at the points. They put planets, they put musical notes, they put foods, but they never put personalities. And I believe that's because while psychology was invented in the 1800s, it was not really codified until the 30s and 40s. And so it was just a little bit beyond that. So it came to one of Ouspensky's students, who was both a psychologist and a spiritual seeker, to put personalities at them. And so the Enneagram of personality are it's an archetypal system.
Hmm.
I believe it's the archetypal system, that it is the core personality types, that we have one story at our core, and this particular story gives us all our triggers. And while psychology is a wonderful tool and helps us to have better relationships and to be more understanding of other people, the end game of psychology is just observing behavior. But as a spiritual tool, the Enneagram is unique because its goal is to take us out of our story into the moment. And it gives us the particular color coding of our particular story. It doesn't have any bias because it'll give you the story of your own story. The teachers have bias. The teacher's bias is their own story. So while a teacher can teach everyone, they don't necessarily come and are able to see your own story. So the story, would you like me to quickly go through the stories so that you
Sure.
get an idea of what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
They have names, but they're also given numbers 1 through 9. 9 is Y9 is I call it the architecture of the solar system. Why 10 fingers? Why 10 toes? Why one nose and 2 nostrils? 2 eyes, 2 ears, one mouth. Why is that? It's just the architecture of the solar system.
Hmm.
9, I believe, is a initiative number. It's an initiation number. 3 has an energy of the triad, and 4 is more linear.
Hmm.
4 bases, 4 noble truths in Buddhism. 7 is the 7. The prism is divided into 7 colors.
Hmm.
and 9 is a little bit higher. There were a lot of Enads. Enneagram means 9-sided figure in Greek. So there were a lot of Enads in 9 gods in Egypt. They had a few different Enads, and there was also South American cultures that had Enads.
Yeah.
9 gods, and so it's a particular story. Astrology, by the way, is at 12 is 3 times 4, so it has the freedom of the triad at 3, and then it has the grounding of 4 to 12. It's my particular theory.
Yeah.
So the 9 stories, the one is the perfectionist, and his role is to teach us about the perfection of life, but he or she has to go through his own judgmentalness about that everything needs to be right, which is a protective tool. And the 2 is the helper, which will teach us to be caring and loving to all, but they have to go through the pain of not being worthy of love and helping everybody so that people will give them the love that they don't have. See if you see yourself in one of these.
I see myself in both so far.
Okay, so the one that's everyone is the 9, the peacemaker. Usually.
Oh, so I must be a 9.
I'll get to that at the end.
Okay.
Are you a 9, the peacemaker? They need harmony everywhere.
They said that I was literally every single number, but if 9 is all of them, then maybe I'm just 9.
Okay. So the 3 is the achiever. They teach us about producing and making hay in this life, and they have to go through the idea of being attached to what they produce in order to fulfill their ego. The 4 is the romantic, and they are the sensitive ones. They use adjectives like nobody else. Dylan, Whitney Houston, Michael Jackson, all these incredible musicians, many of which are not with us. Prince, sensitive ones, and they teach us about the appreciating the beauty of life in their own eternal vulnerability. 5s are the observer. They teach us the wisdom of life. Buddha was a 5, and they go through the pain of needing to know how things work, and hiding themselves in knowledge. The 6 is the loyalist. They teach us about security and safety, and they go through they have to go through feeling doubtful and feeling anxiety that the world is not secure in order to be able to teach us loyalty. The 7, I'm a 7, is the enthusiast. We teach people about being in the moment, but we have to learn to be sober to life, which means we like experiences, and we need the experiences. We need the greener pastures of life because we are running away from our own feelings. The 8 is the warrior with an A, warrior, not the worrier. And 8s teach us in defending everybody and teaching us to be strong within ourselves. Jack Nicholson. They teach us, they have to go through the pain of having only an offense, and having the defense is to cover the teddy bear in their heart that they don't want anybody to see their own vulnerability. So they go out with all offense. And the 9 is the peacemaker, at the top of the Enneagram figure. They teach us about love, and they go through the pain of disconnection to themselves and merging with other people in order to protect themselves from their own pain of disharmony within them. That by disconnecting, they create the disharmony that they are trying to leave.
Interesting. I can see why I would be every single one except 5 is the only one that I don't relate to at all. So I bet that was the one, because I remember when I got the results, it was like every single one except one number, and I couldn't remember which number, but I'm guessing it's 5.
So to go a little bit further with it, I won't take too long. So we have wings, which is the number on either side of us. these are coping strategies. And so as a 9, we'll say you're a 9, you would go to 1, where you would become the perfectionist and where you would find fault with people. Or you might go to the 8, where you would become more aggressive and more assertive.
I do that.
And we also have a stress place. When those don't work, then we go to a stress place. So each number goes to another number. 7 goes to 1.
Okay.
4 goes to 2. 9 goes to 6, where you become doubtful. So you're walking down the hall and you're becoming doubtful and you're becoming anxious and stressed. You're not normally anxious, but in stress you become anxious and doubtful, and there's a hamster wheel spinning in your head. And we also go to a place of relaxation, which is set for each number. 7 goes to 5, 4 goes to 1, 6 goes to 9, 9 goes to 3. So they become more productive in relaxation. It isn't that they aren't. They're called sloths. 9s are called sloths. They have a laziness to them. It's not that they don't accomplish in life, but they know that they come with nothing and they leave with nothing. So they say, why work up a sweat in between? So they kind of push themselves in order to accomplish things. And in relaxation, they go to 3, where they become more relaxed and more productive. And there's a teaching that in our stress we can also exhibit some relaxation tendencies, and in our stress, in our relaxation place, we can also go there in stress. It's kind of a thing that the Enneagram is still evolving. It's not totally codified, and there are many people who use it all over the world. It's in Hollywood. There are a lot of books about, they cast based on that. It's a must for HR people. How can you hire somebody without knowing Enneagram, without knowing the team that you're bringing them into? Because personalities, when you have a personality clash, if you take it to the Enneagram, then everything becomes really clear. So I use it as a tool I suggest everybody, you could take tests online. There are free tests around. You can take tests online that are not very expensive, but you can get it for free. There is a credible amount of information. Just Google it. If anybody wants to contact me, I'd be happy to help them to figure out their number. It's an incredible tool to help us to know our core triggers, to help us to know what takes us out of the moment. The patterning that we can see from the Enneagram is astounding. It's astounding that we can know the patterning. It's astounding that we're so patterned.
Yes.
That numbers react in known and comprehensible ways. And yes, we can overcome the patterning. We overcome the patterning by observing our own behavior, by letting it go, by seeing through it.
Yes.
Will we still have preferences? Absolutely. But the idea is to get rid of the compulsion.
Yeah. Let go of the unconsciousness of it and the just reactivity. Well,
yes.
So it makes sense then that I might actually be only one number, but I was just seeing some of the other, like you're saying, like in stress or in this situation, you might go to that other number. And maybe I was seeing more of that or something. Or is it normal to have multiple numbers?
So do you merge in your relationships? Will you merge with your partners and lose your own identity?
I don't lose it, but I mean, even if I'm just in a room with somebody for a while, like I connect with them deeply. I can like reflect back at them much of what they're doing or being, but I don't ever lose my core self.
So when you were 20s and when you were in your 20s, did you lose yourself in relationships?
Yes, absolutely. But not
okay. So your problem
less so in my as I went later and later into my 20s. So yeah, but yes, early on, definitely.
So my guess that you were a 9, and I don't mean to be personal. I'm trying to show people how it works, and
no, it's
to
totally
get
fine.
back to you, and I'm not trying to dig.
Yes,
okay, so
it's fine.
So when you were young and you were in your parents' home, was harmony really important to you?
I had nothing but disharmony, so I would have liked harmony.
Okay. Okay, but did you try to mediate between people?
I was the Yeah, there's a role in the alcoholic family structures that is, and I forget what it is, but I'm that, and it's like that. It's like the peacemaker or whatever, like the person who wants to make everything
Okay,
better.
so you're giving me all of the 9 behavior.
Okay.
Okay, so my guess is that you're a 9. So going back to your question is that the 9 merges with everybody and they
That's
they
why.
they lose themselves, even if you yes, you can overcome it. And what you've done is you have that tendency, but you are seeing through it. But you have that ability to merge with other people. Other people can merge, but it's the 9 who has that as a native ability. There are people who have charts. People who have sun with 2 or 3 other planets tend to be a little ungrounded in themselves, and they also merge with other people, and so they also have trouble finding themselves in the Enneagram scale, and they don't identify with themselves very well. They have to come into their identity story in order to be able to let it go. I believe in awakening, you have to come into it in order to let it go.
Yeah.
And but the 9, this is the core story.
Okay. I don't
And
I don't relate at all with the lazy part because I've always been incredibly productive and like full of motivation in all spheres at all times. Except like
so
yeah, I've calmed down a
so
bit.
some 9s don't relate to it, but
Okay.
it's the unwillingness to fully engage with life with one's full vitality. The unwillingness or inability to fully engage with one's life with full vitality.
Hmm.
And that there is you could have a very strong Mars, which contradicts that a little bit. I'm
Hmm.
not going to say you're a 9, but
Yeah.
I'm just playing with this to
The
give to you, and
possible.
also, yeah, so for people to hear what it's about, to put it into a real connotation so that people can understand what it is.
And I
It's
think
up for
it
you to decide that you're a 9.
okay. And I think it also clarifies kind of what part of your art and your work is helping people see both the Enneagram and their actual astrology, their sidereal or Vedic astrology together, and how those would correspond with each other and play with each other.
So I was totally blessed to have a teacher when I near the beginning of my Enneagram who had intuited a system that explains the Enneagram in astrological ways.
Hmm.
He's the only one that I have found that has a working system. There
Wow.
are people there. I have not found much interest in this, which totally amazes me. The Enneagram people are pretty much into Enneagram, and the astrology people are kind of into astrology.
Wow.
The two together are totally outstanding. It leaves
Yeah.
the field very open for me. There are people that have a couple of systems. There are people that do a 1-to-1, that Saturn is a 4 and Mars is a 8 and Pluto, Venus is a this and Sun is a this. I don't think that fits a little bit, but it doesn't. I think we're too complex for it to be a 1-to-1. And there are some people who have Western systems. I don't see it in Western. I was taught it Vedic. I only know it as Vedic.
Yeah.
I don't know how you can do it in Western, but anyways, the fact is that there are different markers, and so there are planetary configurations that express the points. And for example, uh, I call a person that has. Do you know much about astrology, by the way?
I dabble. I'm loosely familiar, but I don't
Okay,
have everything
so
memorized.
the people that have a planet in that 12th house and a planet of the second house, and don't have a planet in the first house, so they're blank where they are, first house of self, but they have a planet on either side that I call them Jiminy Crickets.
They have like
Okay, I
the
call them
yeah.
the Jiminy Cricket combinations, and I've also found it to work with 5, 6, and 7 the same way. 7 being the outer reflection of self in
Okay.
partnerships and in relationships. Okay, so these Jiminy Crickets, these become this little voice. You know, Jiminy Cricket, Pinocchio, Geppetto said we got to be home at 10. If you tell a lie, your nose are going to grow. Don't play with those kids. They're bad news. Okay, those are the Jiminy Crickets. And so for the The people that have the Jiminy Cricket combination, this is a little one-ish. This is this, I got to do it the right way. The right way. How do they know what the right way is? They make it up. And so they have this the inner critic. For some people are these Jiminy Crickets. It's not only ones that have it, but the people who have this combination of a planet in, or planets in 2 and 12, but nothing in 1, have this combination of these mental inner critics that they are always looking toward, and they change depending on what the planet is. The nature of the voice changes depending on which planets they are.
So if you were a 9 and had that going on, you'd have like the hardest time having a solid identity or like knowing who you were. Would that be true?
Well, I don't see that so much in 9s, but
Okay.
But 9s, I find 9s and 1s, I find they have Mars in the 12th house. I don't think your Mars is in your 12th house if you're that energetic. But Mars in the 12th house, the 9 and 1 is an anger position, and in the 12th house, the house of transition, Mars being the planet of anger, it's they don't feel they hold back the anger because it's ethereal. It's not in their body. So I find that 9s and 1s quite often, as we call it a marker, and it isn't. It might be in 30% of the cases, which is actually a fairly high percentage.
Yeah.
You might find Mars in the 12th house, and the Jiminy Crickets could be for any type. I don't see it so much for 9s because 9s they only get this criticalness when they're triggered, and they go to 1 and become perfectionists, and then they have a criticalness. As 9s, they're easygoing and seek peace and disengage. But as the 1, then they become rule-oriented and having expectations about things being done the right way. And so people who have a lot of comparisons and a lot of judgmentalness, they might have this combination. And again, I'm using that as an example just to show how the Enneagram and the planets can work together in order to really tell a deep story. And I can help people to see I can help them to understand things that they don't understand about themselves because I can put it into it. It's not that they don't know, but they don't put it into a whole story. I was supposed to work yesterday with a lady that has a complicated chart, and I have a feeling that she knows some of the aspects of it, but she doesn't see it as a whole picture. So I was looking forward to working with her in order to be able to explain to her own uniqueness combination that has planets in few houses. People with planets in 4 houses is a 4%er. So people with planets in 4 houses, only 4 houses, tend to be very concentrated on a small aspects of life, really intense about some aspects of life, but they have twice as many empty houses where they don't have any information. It's blank to them. So they tend not to be very universal. People that have 8 planets in 8 houses, 9 planets in 8 houses, 4 empty, they tend to be very universal, but not so grounded in themselves.
Interesting. I like learning these kind of overviews of these things because I feel like I've gotten a lot of the details, and then this is sort of helps you connect it into this overall pattern that is easier to understand relationships within it and why that might be helpful in looking at in your life. So that's really interesting.
So that's what was interesting to me. The details weren't so interesting to me, and they were harder to grasp.
Yeah.
But the overviews were much more interesting. I've got Jupiter in 10th house, so 10th house of career, Jupiter expansion. So I look at the world, the 10th house, the highest point in the sky. I look at the world through an expanded point of view. The details are difficult.
That's exactly That's exactly me. I'm like, I'm really good at concepts and relationships and overviews, and I'm not going to remember the details and the at all. And I say that I have a bad memory, but I think when it comes down to it, I don't actually have a bad memory. I just don't hold on to the details. I just keep the sort of network of relationships, and that's what I run with.
So we can have a planetary configuration that makes that, not only encourages it but actually makes it, that it's not a whim.
Yeah,
It's a
that makes sense
pour.
to me.
My, my teacher my teacher described it as you make a sand castle and you take water and you pour it down the top of the sand castle and it just pours out its own grooves. And so we
Yes.
make our own grooves based on the pour that we have, and the pour is the planetary placement. We have planets that are in signs that they're very comfortable in. We have planets that are in signs that are very neutral, and they're neither good nor bad. It's not where we play out our life. And then we have planets that are in signs that are uncomfortable. A
Oh,
fire sign and a fire planet and a water sign, a water planet and a fire sign. This creates an edginess, and this edginess is something that we compensate for in our behavior.
hmm.
This creates the compulsions. And so those are the deeper grooves, and those are the ones that we work on. And planets being cuspy at the edge will create an edginess. Planets being conjunct will create an edginess that they will go down together and up together. And so if you've got Venus and Mars together, then when you get critical, judgmental Venus, then you will stop doing.
Ah,
Understand that
yeah.
you Venus is a planet of integrity, and so the low side of integrity is criticalness and judgmentalness,
Hmm.
and Mars is the planet of doing, and so when you get critical, then you stop doing.
Hmm. Yeah.
And the combinations are such that I explain in the readings that it's not any combination. Sun and Mercury is a common combination, so that when you feel uh, low self-esteem, then you stop talking or you talk too much. But the combinations are unique to your particular chart, and so I put the combinations together, even three planets or four planets, and those are their particular combinations that when they stop doing, then they stop communicating, stop doing Mars, stop communicating Mercury, have low self-esteem Sun, and become emotional Moon.
That's
The
fascinating.
way out of that is to separate the planets, is to realize that if you want to do, and don't let your emotionality or low self-esteem or your criticalness stop you from doing what you want to do.
Yes. Walk into the class late, even though you're scared to do it.
Or
um,
not.
what? So how do people
What is
then?
late? By the way, what
True.
is late?
Perfect time. It's a good point. So, how do people then, if they want to access your skills and abilities and offers, is there a way that people can get these readings from you and enjoy
Yeah,
that
I do them
analysis?
online. I'll be back in California, God willing, next week. But I do them online all over the world. And I have a website, indrarinzler.com, INDRA, Rinzler, RINZLER. It's one word.com is the website. Indrarinzler at gmail.com is the email. I'm on Facebook, Indra Rinzler. You can go there, but just connect and love to work with people. And I'm happy to help people find their Enneagram gratis. And I do tend to be very approachable and help people. If people say I have a problem, how can I not inquire and try to support them? So if people need help, what I do is kind of unique, I like to think. I mean, it's not totally unique, but it's unique use of the modalities. And I don't do psychic, I don't do predictions. I use a lot of intuition. It comes. And I'm really, what I do is intense because it's a real, it's a real deep dive into your own story. It's not very confrontational.
Yeah.
People seem to be very comfortable with me, which is very pleased with. But we can go into personal things, and I say, no, I'm not trying to be judgmental or critical in this. They say, no, I understand, and I say, look, you're running stuff, and yeah, thank you. People end up with a big thank you about it, and which is wonderful. So, uh, yeah. Uh, I'm not sure what else to say about that. I have there's a third modality that I use that I
Oh,
should at least touch on if that's
yeah.
okay.
No, I would love that. I did not know.
So the third modality is I call that the wheel of totality. It was given to me by spirit, I do believe, and it's not something that I can't really say I came up with it. So the idea is that people talk about the houses with planets, but they don't really talk about the empty houses.
Hmm.
In some astrology, they'll go to the ruler of the empty house. If you have you ask a relationship question and your relationship house is empty, then in some astrologers in Vedic astrology, they'll go to the ruler. If it's in Cancer, then they'll go look and see where the moon is and they'll make up a story based on that. I like to say that if I'm having an operation, I don't want the doctor on Skype. I want the doctor there. There is
Yeah.
no planet in your relationship house.
Yeah.
And what it means is that relationship is not very important to you. It
Hmm.
doesn't mean you won't have relationships, but it's not very important. And so when I
Interesting.
say that to people, they say, oh yeah, a relationship isn't really very important to me. So the empty houses contain awareness, but because we don't have a planet there, we don't have a native skill on that awareness. These awarenesses that I use, the first house is discovering who you really are. I should say that the houses are based on that the houses are similar. The wheel of totality is based on 12 houses like astrology. I used to say that the wheel was based on astrology. I now say that astrology is based on the wheel, but I think the wheel is before astrology. And when you hear what they are, maybe you'll understand. And at the center is totality. That's the goal. It's a spiral, so you kind of move into the center. And the awarenesses or the aspects that we use in the wheel of totality are different. They're analogous to the ones in astrology for each house, but they're different and they're much deeper and more universal. So the first house is discovering who you really are. Now understand that if you have a planet there, then you have a native ability in discovering who you really are, ability to find that. Will you discover who you really are? Who you really are is essence? No, you may not necessarily discover who you really are, but you have an ability, a natural ability to do that. If you don't have a planet there, then discovering who you really are is a difficulty that you tend to be ungrounded in yourself. So the second house is duality. People that have a planet there live in gray. People who don't have a planet there live in black and white.
Hmm.
The third house is mind. That if people have a planet there, then they can tend to see through the mind. The people that don't have a planet tend to get stuck in the mind. The fourth house is heart. People that have a planet there can open their heart. They can have love of self. The fifth house is God, which starts as a man on the throne and it becomes an intelligence that is universal. People that have a planet there can trust and accept what is. People that don't have a planet there have trouble trusting and accepting what is. The sixth house is practice. Practice is the 24/7 living in undisturbed consciousness. Ultimately, practice is the uphills of life, paying our bills, It's understanding that on the mat and off the mat are the same. It's the ability to be able to take the stretching up the wall in yoga class and apply it to the difficulties that we have at work or with other people. The seventh house is seeing through conditioning. People that don't have a planet there have trouble letting go of parental ideas. I had a client recently say that she's working a career she didn't want. Not surprised she didn't have a planet in the seventh house because she was conditioned into thinking that that's what she should do.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah.
So if you have a planet there, then conditioning isn't so much of a problem. Conditioning is both family and societal. You have a strength there. Eighth house is no separation. The people that have a planet there understand that there is no separation. The people that don't have a planet tend to live in separation, which isn't to say that the people that have a planet there, they also live in separation.
Right.
But they have the ability to understand that no separation is that we are not separate, that we only seem separate, but we are not separate.
Yeah.
So the ninth house is the ultimate truth, is the emptiness. It's the quiet within, that I use nature as a metaphor, that the people that have a planet can live in the quiet in nature all the time. The people that don't have a planet there, they can be quiet in nature, but when they get back to the car, they're already thinking about what to make for dinner and what to get at the grocery store.
Mm.
That they have they don't have that stillness and quiet within. The 10th house is universal love. Universal love is an attitude. It doesn't need an object. Making love is not really about love. It's mostly about satisfying needs. It's mostly have ego in it, and so universal love is the 10th house quality. The 11th house is realization, the ability to trust that there is something beyond ourselves. The realization that the fruit is always dropping from the tree. In fact, that there's fruit on the ground. We don't actually have to do it. There's nothing to do, but the fruit is there for our taking. And the 12th house is transcendence and impermanence. That it's the transition house, that everything is change. The people that don't have a planet there have trouble with change, trouble accepting change. The people that have a planet there understand that change is natural. And these are very lofty and difficult concepts.
Yeah.
And I find that people don't necessarily start working on these until their 50s. They have to be done with the ego of 20s and 30s in order to be able to, because I like to say if you say to a 20-year-old, and I don't want to stereotype, but if you say to a 20-year-old, open your heart, and they say, my heart is open. But if you say it to a 50-year-old, they're going to say, tell me more, because I've been hearing that for the last 10 years, or 20 years. So in that openness is the ability to be able to look at what we don't know. And so these are pretty lofty spiritual concepts. The idea is that as you understand these and deal with them, then you come closer to the center, and then you dip into totality.
Yeah. I can see it. I like that you arrange
So
it as a spiral. Sorry.
So I overlay I overlay the natal chart onto that to show where you have planets and where you don't.
That's really cool. So when someone comes and seeks out your services, are you do all of that no matter what, or are people choosing which parts to do, or?
Well, they can choose. Most people take the full reading. It's 3 hours or more. In India, we were doing a lot of 5-hour readings. I had a 6.5-hour reading recently online. I think that's the longest one reading I've ever had. I had a client take 10 hours over 3 sessions.
Wow.
And it's all up to people's. Some people, some people aren't interested. When they say I say, well, why do you want the reading? If they say curious, it's not going to go so deep. Curiosity isn't enough. They have to have some pain that they need to. Then they take it more, and so that's fine. Curious is fine. at the fairs I do, then they'll pick one. Sometimes
Yeah.
people will pick all three, but usually it's one.
Yeah.
And you can only have one. Sometimes people only do any astrology.
Okay.
Some people have only done wheel. But most of the people that I work with will do all three. That they're interested. They may get drawn in by one, but then they get intrigued with
Yeah.
all three, and they work together. They provide they provide a different perspective.
Yes.
They come from the three modalities are very different, and they come from different perspectives. While the wheel also uses the astrological alignment, there's a big difference between what you have and what you don't have.
Yeah. Well, I've never thought about it in that way. You're the first person to make me understand that there are, there's all these things that you do have. You see all these signs and all these houses and stuff, but I never thought of what I did not have. I never thought about the houses or whatever that don't have things. So that's interesting. I like that that spiral and that totality sounds really interesting, and I'm sure that people listening are thinking about like, oh, should I do this? This sounds like a pretty good one, and that you do all three of those modalities is pretty enticing as well. So that's exciting, and I like you can tell that. Even though we didn't really dig into it too deeply, that you sort of came to these things like throughout life, but you are the one who saw like how they all interconnected and brought them together to make this even more full experience that people can have. Just like we were talking about, seeing that sort of top down view and seeing how everything connects, you can see how that came together in this process for you.
Well, either I figured it out or it was given to me.
Yeah. Well, same, right?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm not sure, Lindsay. I figured it out. I think it was given to me. But the fact is that it's something that I was seeking. That I have been doing. I first. I probably picked up an astrology book before I picked up a spiritual book, and we're talking 1971 or 1970. So we're talking a long time ago. So the astrology was there for a really long time, but it was never clear. It was mostly on a back burner because the astrology that I saw, I didn't really radiate with. I love the idea of it as a on a mathematical and geometric understanding, and I love the idea of the shapes of the charts and but I didn't really make it my own until relatively the later years. So I will say to people, uh, you guys are young, not to worry. That the book that if you don't have what you're going to write the book about, not to worry. That you're working toward it. I know you've written a bunch of books, but the people who haven't, it's not only talking about the books, but there's a lot that comes with the maturity. That there's a lot that comes with the the relationship you have in your 20s is not the same as the relationship you have in your 40s as an intimate relationship, and it isn't to say that you're doing the same things, but the fact is that they talk about the importance of the rest in music, that without the rest, it's not really music. It's just a cacophony of sound. But what the rest makes the music, and so the put spaces in your togetherness. Gibran in the 60s, we didn't quote Rumi. We Gibran. I forget
Yeah.
what was the book that.
Khalil Gibran and the.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, I know what you're talking about, but I can't think of the title of that book that
Yeah.
everyone
Well,
had.
that was big in the 60s, maybe the 70s too, maybe still into the 80s and 90s. But anyways, put spaces in your togetherness spaces. So you go on a trip and you come back with your partner, and it's like and it's like as in the 20s, it's like, oh my God, you're going away. How will I survive?
Yeah.
So put that. What I'm trying to say is, you put that consciousness, you put that energy, you put that teaching, you put that viewpoint into other aspects of your life, and you wait until juiciness of hey, I don't want to say, I was going to say accomplishments, but the things that we get involved in later life, they have a depth to them that is, yeah, it's like eating that orange after you fasted, or eating the salad after you fasted for 10 days,
Oh my God. Even just a
Yeah.
tomato, you're like, this is the best thing I've ever had.
That's that opportunity is open to us in so many aspects of life.
I love that. I feel like I'm on this like intentional rest and space that I've put into my life right now, but I can understand that it's not like the rest and space that I'm going to have someday. It's like a precursor to the real deal maybe or something. Who knows?
So when I write, I don't know if this is like, if it's probably everybody does this, but if I write, I'm sort of writing this thing, and you get to a place where you write a bit, and then you say, well, let me leave it and look at it tomorrow, because tomorrow I'm going to have completely different ideas,
Oh yeah.
and I'm going to have more insight tomorrow than I do today, and that's the process, and that I didn't have. So I'm writing this thing about safer safety, and it's evolving. So then last night I had a little bit of time, and I listened to transcribing something without going into the details, but I'm transcribing something that we did in the spring a year ago. A friend of mine did, and she was actually talking about the wheel and did not mention the word safe or safety, but she actually was giving me an answer to a question that I hadn't formed. She was talking about trust, and then I saw the trust of fifth and the 11th house. It's the only ones I listened to last night, but I could see that the solution to the question of safety or safe in life is trust. I wrote, I didn't have an answer. So then I waited a few hours, and then the answer came, right?
Which
The answer to how can I be safe is to trust.
which is also you lived that process to find that answer. You know, like you had to trust
Absolutely.
in the process for it to even
Yes,
come.
absolutely. And that it's beautiful that you say that. That is the process.
Which brings us back to the
That is the
beginning.
process.
Yeah, which is that trust is sort of
That is the process, is that it's not that you have to use that trust in order to figure it out. It's actually in figuring that out. That is the process that you have to then apply to everything.
yes. I love that. I think that that's a beautiful, beautiful message to send out to people, and I do want to draw it towards the closure here. But I wanted to ask you first. You know, we know you're heading back to the United States and California soon, but do you have any things coming up or places you hope to sort of head and end up that you want to share with us, or projects coming up or anything like that?
Sure. I'm going to be have a stand at 3 shows in Northern California if they go on.
Yeah.
I'm not sure they're going to go on.
True. Yeah, they're
But
canceling
if
a
they
lot.
go on,
We'll see.
in Turlock and in my hometown, Nevada City, and Chico, in April there'll be 3 shows. I'm going to be doing. I'm planning to do my big event is at a place called Eastover in Lenox, Massachusetts, right next to Tanglewood and right next to Kripalu Institute is a place called Eastover. It's a 100-year-old mansion with 600 acres
Wow.
that has um, New Age type classes. Maybe New Age isn't the right term, but
Spiritual, sort of.
yeah, spiritual healing and
It's
kinds
hard to
of
find the right
things.
words now.
Alternative classes. So I'll be there in June and July teaching a 5-day, one on Enneagram and one on astrology.
Cool.
And they will have a lot of the spirituality. The point of the classes is not the tool. I'm going to teach the tool, but the point of it is to use the tool in order to learn yourself.
Yeah.
So I will bring in a lot of the spirituality into these classes. Those are the events that I have coming up. I don't know about other than that. The event parts, the readings. I've been doing the readings, and I can do them. Love to do them in person, but online. That's the thing that's going on. One by one, people come. The people I get are usually individualists. I do get recommendations, but what I do is pretty unique. It's not for everybody.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I'm happy with that, and that to be able to we touch deeply into each other, and it's the kind of a reading that years later you're still working on it.
Yeah.
I don't mean only. I don't mean only. The seeds are still germinating.
Yes.
And still using reflections. And if you listen to it again, you'll get more insights even years later, because there's things you can't hear. There's depths you can't hear.
Absolutely.
Things
I relate to it
today.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like you don't even
the whole
have
idea of,
a place to understand it right now, but then you'll get somewhere and you'll look back and you'll be like, oh, that thing. And then you'll go see it and be like, oh, yeah, I totally get this now.
Yeah. So Portland was what, a year and a half ago?
Was that it? Yeah, I guess
think
so.
it was, a year and a half ago, and here we are talking about it and learning from walking down the hall,
Yes.
ready to open the door. You're learning from. So,
Absolutely.
And I'm learning too.
Well, and I have I'm on your newsletter list, I think, and so you send out a newsletter every once in a while, and then there's always something in there that I'm like, perfect. This is perfect.
So if people want the newsletter, they can send me their email address.
Yeah.
So they can get on that list. So if they want that, I don't send them out too frequently, and
no.
The ones that are coded towards local events don't go to everybody.
And
there are some that go to everybody. They're not so often.
I like that, because you're clearly sharing things when you have something to say, not just to meet a quota or a deadline or fulfill a duty or something. It's like, there's always something meaty and poignant there, and I like that.
Okay, well, it's New Year's and I get to a foreign country. I do like to let people know I'm there. So there is a little bit of purpose to it. But I do try to find something that is, I don't write it until I find some worthwhile message to share also.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and the Facebook posts, they don't always come, but the Facebook posts now have been pretty meaty, and if people are interested in that, they don't have a regularity. It's not an overwhelming amount, but they seem to come from a clear space.
Yes.
So if people want to befriend or look into that,
yes,
it's another way to connect. So I'm happy to do whatever I can to support people wherever they are, both physically and
psycho-spiritually.
Psycho-spiritually, yeah, whatever. That's still kind of limiting, but
yeah,
wherever they are.
Right.
Because I have something to learn, so teach me.
That's what makes.
I'll put out the plea. Teach me.
I love that. That's what makes that beautiful process, is that it's not one way. Like you said, you're going deeply into each other when you're in this process, and that is a beautiful thing. It's really powerful for, I'm sure, you and the person receiving the reading. And I've had astrological readings before. I've never had an Enneagram reading. I've never had the, obviously, Wheel of Totality, because I've never even heard of it before. So I'm definitely interested in doing all three of those someday. So I'm sure you'll be hearing from me, and I'm sure there's people listening who are definitely piqued and are going to go check it out and consider it too. And I always like to point out with people, with these types of things, it's like you said, you're gonna look back on it for a long time, and it's going to be ongoing. So it's definitely something that I think. It's just like, I think it takes people a long time sometimes to commit to like, okay, I'm going to do it. But I just think it's something that it's not like anyone's going to regret it. No one's going to get this experience and get this much feedback in depth and look at it and say like, wow, I wish I wouldn't have done that. I think that's my understanding, at least, and that's my experience so far.
Well, I would say that that's true. I think that people amaze me in that they're willing to they're willing to open my Pandora's box. They have absolutely no idea, because they haven't heard Enneagram. While they know a little bit about astrology, they say, I've never heard of Wheel of Totality. I said, That's not surprising. So they have absolutely no idea what I'm going to do. Even if they read the website, you still don't really know, and they're willing to jump into this
it's that trust,
this pond with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. So they do that, and no, people afterwards are very appreciative, and they're very amazed, and I do like to say that the people that have real, I mean, the psychosis and huge traumas, I don't necessarily deal with that, but people that are really confused about who they are and where they're at and trying to make an understanding of their life, these big questions that they have, I have these modalities really help those particular people, that it is not the people that know what they're doing and who they are. I don't help those people quite as much unless they're egotistical or then I can give them some feedback, but that's not the people. The people who are good-hearted and lost souls, those people are the ones that I can really help, because I can give them an explanation. I like to say what I do is science and intuition.
Yes.
That the modalities are based on science. There is a science to astrology.
Absolutely.
The science to astrology. There is an internet experiment, an internet-based experiment, and you take a metal plate and you hook it up to a sound generator. Then you put sand on the metal plate and you turn on the sound generator, and the sand will vibrate into patterns.
Oh yeah, cymatics.
So the more complex, the higher the frequency, the more complex the pattern.
Right.
So I believe this is the proof of astrology, that there is an implication. There's nothing wrong with the planet.
Yeah.
But the fact that the sun is the same sun in the winter, still the same sun, but the angle of the sun is different,
and
so
changes everything.
It changes the temperatures, it changes the seasons, it changes the trees. The trees go through a tremendous metamorphosis, and plants and animals go through metamorphosis. Stop growing, some of them die. So that energy, that science, I believe, is the proof of astrology.
Yeah.
I understand the connection?
Oh, absolutely. It's like those energies are coming through and being manifesting in a physical way that we can see and understand. And like you said, I liked the sandcastle analogy as well, because you're looking at these energies flowing in, and how are they going to sort of come out, and how is that going to look, and how is it going to express itself. And I think both are really good analogies, although the cymatics one with the patterns in the sand on the plate is much more scientific and materialist, sort of satisfies that need for people if they want to look at it in that way. But I think they're both equally as valid, and I like that it keeps coming back to that idea of trust over and over again in this conversation. I feel like that's like the theme of the conversation, and trust yourself to seek this and look into it if you are a seeker. And when you're describing the types of people that you feel like you can help best, like that's what I feel like it is people who are seeking. And I often state it that way when I'm, offering my tarot readings to people. I was the same way. It's like, if you're seeking, then this is an option for you. If you're not seeking, then it's not going to help you much. Or if you're not confused, it's not going to help you much. Or, if there's not something, but if you're, like you said, if you're really deep in the chaos and the turmoil and the sort of trauma of life, and you may need a more acute, more personal, hands-on approach than what these can really offer you in the moment. But but if you're seeking, then I think these are some of the options that are open to you, and that you should look into and see what you can offer, because it's all of them are sort of this way of looking more deeply at yourself and seeing those patterns and having another person and just another way to sort of reflect on them and see how you can come into a deeper relationship and understanding with them, I think. So, which is great. It's perfect. And I just want to ask you then, as we're sort of closing down, what are the ideas and messages or pieces of advice or words of wisdom that you would like to leave with people as they're heading off into their night?
Love yourself.
Absolutely.
Don't make it so complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Just trust what is. Be humble. Let go. These are all cliches.
But they're all true. They're all true, and they're all things we need to think about more often or practice.
Yeah, just love yourself. I was going to say that the reading is really the end of the beginning. That the reading is the reading is. I will work with people. I can work with people a few times, and then sometimes people come back over a period of time. But it's meant to be a self-realization. It's meant to be their own. I'm teaching them to do it themselves. I'm not. I'm a support system in that I'm there, but it's not creating a permanent crutch. It's not a crutch situation. So see everything as the end of the beginning rather than the beginning of the end. And the same with our sharing together and the day that you're about to end and I'm about to start.
Yeah, true.
Another one. I'm on Monday morning. You're Sunday night on Monday morning.
I love that this whole time I've been able to hear the birds in the background over there because, it's night here and it's awesome.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, sometimes the background is really interesting. I had a lady years ago. I had a lady listen to the recording. We were in India, and the recording was absolutely nuts. Where we were, you couldn't really notice it, but the recording picks it up, and she got a huge realization when she heard all the noise in the background and said, God, my mind must be like that. And it gave her a perspective of it so that she could start to drop those stories and all that noise that she had in her mind, listening to the recording. The recording I'm talking about is cars beeping and whatever the background noises in India are unbelievable.
Yikes.
So India is such a teacher. It's every day you see things that you never thought.
That's awesome.
Every time I go, there's new lessons. So.
And every time she listens to that recording, there's new lessons, like you said. Just keep coming back to it in that spiral.
So.
Till you spiral down to the center.
Yes,
well,
absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And fellow travelers of the path, it is a beautiful thing. This has been your analog electric concentric dose of wisdom, according to Indra Rinzler. Indra, thank you so much for being here tonight. It's been fascinating and delightful.
Thank you so much for having me, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Wonderful to be with you.
Awesome. You too. And we'll keep in touch.
Okay, absolutely.
Patterns.
I look forward to it.
Thank you. Patterns exist everywhere, and they will always ask us to explore. Within them, we will find myriad expressions of ourselves with which to reflect upon. The mirrors are endless in this world, and they will always inform you of where you've been, where you're at, and where you need to go next. And until you've mapped out every aspect of your own pattern and perfected its presentation in this life, travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first. Mwah.
It's a one-on-one lesson, so do your homework. Make your dome hurt while up on earth. My bones are blessed from holy dirt. Vibes manifested to words that told me search for verbs and adjectives to describe birth. Worth more than one can speak, while the tongue beats a weak, a sour taste in your mouth, bittersweet. Words can also kill you when you sleep. Mind condition, low frequencies while the subconscious mind listens. I can tell a vision filled with lies disguised as truth, and spread it like the word to the youth. Watch the tube. A place where the God gets booed is sorcery. To recreate a God forgery does more than meets the eye. Not too many know. Just hear me flow like the eye of Horus Penio. Yeah, not ready to leave until we believe we're free to go. You hear me? Run.
Sculpted from the ether, the material will eat ya. Stuck on this plane, lanes use jet fuel to greet ya. The dimensional three ain't beating me on top of the fourth. Didn't climb Jacob's ladder to squab with a sword. Forged with Yggdrasil, branched down. Try quiet your lamps now. Ascension past the matter, that they slam out they damn mouths. We ain't on land now, but they under over in a stand. Sacrificing wisdom, hoarding dumber kosher wicked hands. Putting faith in worthless worship of the mortals. Artificial portals, mass ingestion of the black goo. Bioengineered morsels, conversing with machine elves. Bypassing maggots, they stuck on Android screens now. I'm scrolling emerald tablets. Moloch living lavish, off the backs of the savage. Them clasped hands at the Sabbath. Smack of energy damage, they done twisted the tongues. But nanotech in the lungs, the awakening's begun. All they really can do is fucking run.